This is Robert Hyde. I'm the vice chair of the commission, and Kenton Peters, our chairman, is not here tonight, so I'll be conducting this meeting, and we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. If we could, commissioners, we'd like to start by approving the minutes from the last meeting that was just sent out earlier this afternoon. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I do. Wayne, are the minutes that were sent out, is that basically what will get sent to the planning commission?
Yeah, they will get sent to the planning commission, but what we do generally, those are a pretty simple summary of the meeting. So we will also provide a summary of the comments made, and also encourage those to go and watch the actual video of the meeting.
Okay.
Paul, did you want more? Did you want something to be noted that was there, or?
Well, I think the motion that I made had like 3 or 4 specific points in it, and I think it'd be a little more informative to the planning commission if those were spelled out. It doesn't have to be verbatim by any means, but if the substance of the individual points were conveyed, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks, Michaela.
This is Kelsey. I can send that verbatim motion language to Rosie tonight.
Oh, well, that'd be great. Thanks, Kelsey.
You're welcome.
Any other comments on the minutes? Thanks, Paul. If not, could we get a motion to approve them subject to what's been discussed already?
I would approve that, or I would make a motion that they would be approved with the language that was just talked about. That would be a little bit more specific.
Second.
That was all in favor. Let's just go through the list. Mike, Paul and Mike made the motion in the second. So I'm going to go through the list here. Jessica.
Aye.
And
Victoria.
Victoria, yeah, you're at the bottom of my list. Sorry, Victoria.
Aye. It's that dang alphabet.
So that's unanimously approved. I'm not voting unless I need to vote. So that was unanimously approved. We'll now go to the The next agenda item is the report of the chair and vice chair. There's no chair here, and I'm the vice chair, and I have no report to make. Wayne, do you have a report from the staff, from the director's report?
Yeah, I'll just give a little overview for those folks that may be watching this and want to join into the meeting. We have a slide up right now that provides some info on how to join. We have 3 items on the agenda, but only the first item is a public hearing. So that's the only item where the public will get to participate. If you do want to participate in that item, you can click on go to the link that's shown on the for you, or you can go to www.slc.gov boards and then navigate to the Historic Landmark Commission. And there you can also view instructions on how to join and participate in the virtual meeting. If you're having trouble logging into the meeting, there is still a way to participate, and you can send an email to us at historiclandmarks, one word, .comments@slcgov.com. Again, the first item is the public hearing. The second 2 items are work session items, so there's no public participation at this point. The purpose of those items is to let the And present the items to the HLC and get feedback from the HLC. These projects will actually go back to the HLC for public hearings and decisions, and you'll be able to participate as the public in at that point in time. And just a little note to the commissioners, I may go through every now and then and mute you because we get a lot of feedback, but if you could help out with that when you're not speaking, if you could go in and mute yourselves, or I've muted you and you want to talk, just make sure that you're unmuted. And that's where we are. Michaela is my co-pilot in this. So Michaela, do you have anything you want to add?
So as your co-pilot, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is if there's any public comments. Is there anyone here from the public besides those who will be presenting on the night matter that have any comments to make generally to the commission?
I don't see anybody in the attendees list other than the applicants.
Okay, that's what I see too, so that makes sense. So we'll go next to the public hearing portion of our commission meeting today, and we're going to talk about the night duplex, and we'll turn the time over to, is it Katie? How do you pronounce your name, Katie?
Katya.
Katya.
Yeah.
I thought it might be something like that. My apologies for not knowing. But
That's
we'll turn
okay.
the time over to the staff contact on this matter, Katya. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I share some content?
You bet.
Yep, you now have the presenter.
All right. So this is a project in the University Historic District. It's a new construction of a two-family dwelling at 1122 East, 300 South. It's right now it's a vacant lot, as you can see. The proposed structure is a two-story high with a basement. There will be a unit in the front, a unit in the back. It's a gable roof with a height of 28 feet at its maximum height, and with shed dormers on the sides. The vehicular access will be from Boyle Place, which is a private alley in the back, and so there's going to be a garage on the rear of the property and an entrance to the rear unit, and on the front facade it's going to be the entrance to the front unit with a covered porch. Both will have a covered porch. As you can see, the garage for the unit in the front is going to be on the east elevation on the side. And this is a site plan of the property. And also there's going to be a covered porch on the back of each of the units. It's the back, but it's actually on the side of the property. Here's the covered porch for the rear unit, and then here is another covered porch for the front unit. So the materials that are being proposed are asphalt shingles, different types of cement fiber like shingles, the board, batten board, lap, cement fiber. The windows that are being proposed are vinyl. There's a metal roof here that's being proposed. The door is a batten wooden door, and wood railings and a brick veneer. Some of the issues that we found are related to the materials, and we find that vinyl windows in the front facade of property in the historic district is not appropriate. Same thing with the metal roof. And the door, it just, the issue that staff finds is that this door is more of a Tudor style, architectural style, not so much a craftsman style, which this house is designed based on. This house would be in between these two properties here that are have the dotted red lines. One is a Victorian style, and the other one is a bungalow. Staff finds that the architectural style fits in with the streetscape of the other properties on that streetscape. As you can see, some of the other homes with a strong gable feature on a lot of these homes. The proposed site is, as you can see, the street 300 South has a very unique feature, which is the topography is where the homes are very in a steep hill, going, both directions, and also from the sidewalk to the front yard property line. On this site specifically, it's about 25 feet, of a difference between the sidewalk and the front property line. As I said before, because of this unique feature, the vehicular access is from the alley. There's no way of really having a garage, and having access from 300 South. So the vehicular access will be from Boyle Place, and that is a common feature with all the other homes along 300 South, except for at the very end of the street on the east. The grade is not as steep. So as you can see, there's a lot of the pedestrian access is on these steps, and that is a very strong feature of 300 South. This is something that, the applicant has already proposed, is part of their proposal is to create these steps from their property to the street. We feel that the architecture fits in with the other homes. this streetscape, the heights of the homes are between 22 feet and 29 feet. This the height of this property is 28 feet. It fits in with the character of the other architecture styles, and there's not a whole lot of impact on the view of these of the streetscape because of the topography. It is also zone R2, which allows for 2 dwelling units on one lot. And this project complies with all the zoning requirements. The only issues that we have, again, is these 3 issues. And if there are any other issues, I would be happy to respond to you right now.
Does anyone have any questions for Katya?
Katya, I know that you mentioned that the door style wasn't really conforming to the overarching style of the house. Outside of an aesthetic choice, is that something that is in our purview, or is that just input for general information?
That's something that I pointed out. If the commission finds it, something that it's, a bigger issue, then it's up to the commission.
So if I understand this, the staff is recommending that we approve this, but at the same time raising these 3 issues you don't particularly like.
Exactly. Especially the vinyl windows and the metal roof, I would recommend that the commission, it's something that I pointed out, but that the commission could make it a condition of, changing that to a more appropriate material for windows in the front facade of this home. I think it would be a lot more appropriate. The review of the windows are appropriate in the design, the openings. The only thing that staff takes issue is the vinyl being in the front yard facade, the front facade of the home.
So if you don't use vinyl, what do you use? Metal or wood?
Yeah, wood would be appropriate. Wood clad would be appropriate.
Fiberglass.
What does staff recommend for the roofing material where they're proposing metal roof?
Asphalt shingle is an appropriate, some sort of wood, roofing material would also be appropriate. But metal roofs are not something that we approve on a historic district.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? Before we have our discussion, we can talk about those issues further when we have our commission discussion, but if we don't have anything more for Katya, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant if we could on this.
Hi, this is Nick Knight. How are you guys?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, I've been listening to all the things and I'm reasonably open to the few minor comments that Katya has. Like for instance, the little shed roof on the front elevation, if that needs to be an asphalt shingle, that's not that big of a deal. I think it was drawn that way just because of the low slope of it, as opposed to an asphalt shingle, but it's small enough and it's not an issue. What other, I mean, really any of those issues aren't that big of a deal. The windows, I was curious if we did a, like a darker color vinyl window as opposed to a clad window, if that would be acceptable, as long as the color was approved before installation. Other than that, what other questions would you like to hear from me? This is my first time doing one of these.
Well, just if you
You might
we
be
don't-
my favorite, short and sweet and responding directly to the concerns. That was awesome.
Yeah, you don't need to, we only want to hear if you have something to add to what the staff report was given to us. So if there's any, you want to explain anything further, so.
No, I mean, all of those things are pretty open to suggestion. Even the front door. I mean, I'm not married to the front door. It was just part of the rendering process a little bit. There wasn't a ton of exact design input there. I mean, to me, I'm a high-end custom home builder, so to me, good colors, good textures, all those things I'm all for. So
help me understand something about the site plan that I couldn't understand on these pictures. Is there a garage that enters from the side of the house for one of the front unit? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Correct. Yeah, there's a double car garage that's kind of acting as the common wall on the side, which is the front unit's double car garage.
So you come down the alley and then turn up one side of the house? Is that how it works?
Correct. Yeah, there's a kind of a hammerhead created by that, where the driveway passes by the garage. The garage where she's got entrance to garage right there is where there's like a 10-foot driveway or so where it kind of house jogs in, and then there's a double car garage there.
Okay. That's what I was guessing. Commissioners, anyone have any questions or comments for the applicant? If not, we'll close. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's maybe more of just maybe kind of a nitpicky design question, but looking at the east elevation, I know in the report that they had requested for the windows to be centered on the dormers. And so then that drew my eye to the dormer in relation to the windows below, and just wondered if there, was consideration for trying to get the windows to line up to below. And that might be nitpicky, but just something that just popped out at me.
I'm not sure, honestly. I haven't looked at these floor plans in a minute because it's been a little bit of a process to get to this point. But if I could get them to line up, I would agree with you on that. I'm not positive of how simple it is with the floor plan layout or not, but I agree that it would be more attractive. I don't think that there's very much, with the closeness of the houses to one another, that you're going to get a lot of perspective at that distance to be able to really see that, because it's kind of a secondary focal point. But I agree with you. And you can see a grade line as well, kind of a dotted line. It's kind of hard to see on this. It's kind of signifying the grade falls off from east to west. So on like that west elevation, for instance, that some of those are going to be under, in a window well type experience where they're not quite lining up.
Yeah, I think what was jumping out at me was more the main level versus the upper floor, but I gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and truthfully, when I was in the process of designing it, and unless that was a specific requirement, I was trying to make sure I had good windows for the interior experience, and I kind of figured that there wouldn't be a lot of exterior perspective where that would be really jumping out at anyone. But I'm open to suggestions, and I can certainly look at whatever you guys propose.
Okay. Any other questions or comments of the applicant?
Robert, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. How do visitors to the southern unit gain access to it? Where do they park?
To the southern unit, there's some parking. They've got parking obviously on the driveway itself in the rear unit, And then other than that, really, they'd have to be out on street parking, which is just outside of Boyle's place. It's probably 50 yards or whatever on the side of the access, and or there is sidewalk where they could come come up from Third South, and then there will be sidewalk connecting where they don't have to go to the front unit, they can go to the back. That's not shown all that clearly here, but that was my intention, to where if somebody wanted to park on Third South, they could walk down the alleyway, down the driveway to get to the southern unit.
Thank you.
If no one else has anything, we'll go ahead and close the public. Well, I guess we're going to open the public. Does anyone in the public have any comments, or we do not have anyone, Wayne, at this time from the public?
That's correct. We do not have, actually, give me 1 second here. Lewis, I would imagine this is Lewis Kogan, but if not, are you here to speak on this item?
I'm not here to speak on this item.
Got it.
Here, yep.
I just saw your first name, Lewis. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll go ahead and close the public
Yes, we
hearing.
don't need anybody to speak.
What was that, Wayne?
Oh, there isn't anyone to speak on the item.
Okay, so we'll close the public hearing, and the commissioners will now speak about what we want to do on this. Is there anyone opposed? We'll talk about these three items under issue 2. Is anyone opposed to granting this COA on this? Subject to what we're going to decide on those other things.
That's not referring to just some of the few design concerns that Katya brought up. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But is there anyone that has overall any concern about approving this? We need, subject to what we decide we want to recommend on the 3 issues on the front of the house. I mean, let's just speak to them now. Does anyone have any? Is the commission in support of the staff's recommendation that we ask the applicant to fix the vinyl windows, change the metal roof, and change the front door in a manner that would be acceptable to staff?
I honestly don't care about the little piece of metal roof. If the remainder of the roof is asphalt shingle, I don't think having that little eyebrow of metal does any harm. And I was struggling to see what the design of the door was. I think the applicant has done a really nice job of designing the rest of the house, so I think it's pretty likely that whatever door he selects will probably be good. I do agree on the vinyl windows. I think in the front we ought to require at least fiberglass or wood clad. Otherwise, I think it's a terrific project. Really like it.
I'm on the same page as Paul, what he just said. Does anyone have any other comments they'd like to make to the aspects here on this front of the house?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Paul. As far as the metal roof on the front, I don't see that as a huge deal either, but it might be interesting to maybe look at, maybe like a composite wood shingle or something along the lines that's a little more craftsman style. But the metal roof, I'm not super opposed to it. Otherwise, I really like the design as well.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing further, would one of the commissioners like to make a motion? There's a motion sheet in our materials there if you want to look at that.
I could make a motion if I just get to it here. All right. Based on the analysis and findings listed in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the commission approve petition PLN HLC 2018-00926, a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the new construction of a two-family dwelling with the following direction. Approval of all final details, including changing the proposed windows to a material that is not vinyl, shall be delegated to planning staff. Does that capture it?
I think that's excellent. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we'll take a vote now. Jessica,
Aye.
Victoria, did Victoria vote?
Yes. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
thank you. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Mike
Aye.
and Paul?
Aye.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you, applicant, and for all your efforts on this, and thank you, staff, for your efforts.
Thank you.
Looks like a project to get built.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll move now to the Fisher House. We've now finished the public hearing portion of the commission. We're going to have 2 study sessions. Anyone is welcome to listen in, but we won't be taking public comments, nor will we be voting on anything. So we'll turn this over to, if I can get this open. This is Lex, isn't it?
This is Kelsey.
Oh, Kelsey's before Lex. That's right.
All right, good evening. Let me just get my screen.
Okay.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. CRSA, on behalf of Salt Lake City Parks and Public Lands, is requesting a major alteration to the carriage house associated with the Fisher Mansion. The subject property is located at 1206 West, 200 South, and is designated as a Salt Lake City landmark site. The structure is proposed to be adaptively reused as a river recreation and community engagement hub. The proposed alterations include modifications for that adaptive use. Staff scheduled this item for a work session due to the importance of this site and the proposed modifications to the exterior of a contributing structure. Staff is requesting that the Historic Landmark Commission discuss the application materials, propose alterations, and provide input, feedback, and direction. Staff will provide just a brief overview of the proposal and then turn the time over to the applicant.
So, okay.
Yes.
No,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Kelsey. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The subject property is located at 1206 West, 200 South. The carriage house is located just to the northwest of the mansion. The property abuts the Jordan River on the west and I-80 to the south. I'm going to just breeze through some of the photos of the existing structure. This is post-earthquake, just keep in mind. So this is the south elevation, the east elevation, as good as I could get on the west, and the north elevation. The proposed alterations include the following for the the south elevation. So they include the installation of a new multi-paneled framed glass door in the vestibule, the replacement of the existing carriage doors with more historically accurate doors, the replacement of the historic conical bumper. They are proposing to replace the glazing within the dormer with louvers for airflow, cleaning of the brick, restore the damaged sills, restore the historic windows, and apply an anti-graffiti coating. The alterations for the east elevation also include the the restoration of the damaged sills, brick cleaning, and the anti-graffiti coating. In addition, they are proposing to install new glass storefront within the vestibule and the replacement or restoration of the spalling stone base. This is the elevation with one of the damaged chimneys, so the chimney will need to be restored and capped as well. For the west elevation, essentially everything that's happening on the other elevations: restore the damaged chimney, repair and restore the historic windows, restore and repair the damaged sills, clean the brick, and then potentially apply that graffiti coating. Okay, and then the north elevation, this elevation will likely need a full replacement of the sill identified under the upper day door. The applicant does believe that this sill is beyond repair. Repointing of the brick, brick cleaning, and then that coating as well. So the work session is intended to introduce the adaptive reuse of this carriage house and to provide the commission and the applicant an opportunity to discuss the proposal. Within the staff memo, the following key considerations were included: the adaptive reuse of the Fisher Mansion carriage house, the use of the anti-graffiti coating on the historic masonry and staff's concerns with that coating, and closing the historic carriage house opening, as well as the Fisher Mansion carriage house and its association with the Jordan River. At this point, I'm happy to turn the time over to the applicant to discuss the proposal, the identified key considerations, and any additional items raised by the commission.
Great, thank you. Who is here for the applicant?
This is John Iwanowski with CRSA Architecture, and Lewis is here as well.
John, do you have a presentation?
Yeah, let me try to share.
Okay, give me just a minute. I need to give you permission here. It might take just a second to go over. So.
So Kelsey, let me get this straight. This is architects presenting on behalf of the city. The city owns this, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. So CRSA is working for Parks and Public Lands on behalf of the city.
Yeah. So we're the commission, Landmarks Commission of the city, and we get to now tell the city how to do things, right?
You get to tell the architect how to do things for the city. Whatever way you like.
We're all on the same side here, aren't we?
Yeah.
And Lewis Kogan is here as well with Parks, and he's actually going to start us off. So,
Great. Okay, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Commissioners, thank you very much for having us on this evening. My name's Lewis Kogan. I am the Division Director for Salt Lake City Trails and Natural Lands. We are the division that is responsible for the maintenance and in large part the activation of the Jordan River Parkway through Salt Lake City. And we have been interested for many years in activating this space at the Fisher Mansion property. The location of the property represents the nexus of the recently completed Jordan River Parkway Trail and what will be the future western terminus of the Folsom Trail, connecting the Jordan River to downtown Salt Lake. This site has certainly suffered from neglect and is one of the locations along the Jordan River Parkway that we feel is most in need of activation. And this, the historic Fisher Mansion and Fisher Mansion Carriage House and the property itself represent a tremendous opportunity in our minds. We are really excited to propose this reuse of the structure and an opportunity to both restore historic features and also activate the property as a trailside exploration center. What we have in mind is using the downstairs of the property for essentially an interpretive center that would be open during regular business hours for travelers on the Jordan River Parkway Trail or people who come to this site as a destination to come in and learn about cultural history of the area, the history of Fisher Brewing and the surrounding neighborhood, and the natural history of the Jordan River, and to engage with our staff and potentially with partners to engage in activities at this site or elsewhere along the Jordan River Parkway Trail. And then the remainder of the structure, including all of the upstairs floor, we would plan to convert into office space for staff with the Trails and Natural Lands Division, particularly our volunteer outreach and education team, giving them a perfect home base on the Jordan River from which to conduct programs. We're further excited about this property where we are investing in a new boat access ramp to the Jordan River adjacent to the Fisher Mansion property that we'll be installing this fall. And we are currently working with the National Park Service in hopes of also creating or establishing a paddle share boat rental program that would operate in part from this property. We're really optimistic that the activation of this property will draw a lot of attention to it and a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about further restoration efforts, including, we hope, draw additional attention to and resources towards the Fisher Mansion itself. And I think with that, I will, well, here's just one more shot, thanks, John, of how we envision reusing what was the carriage bay as sort of a very flexible exploration center, interpretive center. One thing I will say that's really important to us about this space, it's a very for interpretive center of this nature, it's a very small space, which we recognize, and in order to appropriately activate it, use it for staff purposes, and also we hope to bring events and activities to the space, whether that's small festivals or other types of activities or even small private gatherings. We feel like there's a need to make this space as flexible as possible, and so we've encouraged CRSA to be creative in thinking about what are all the opportunities to allow us to flex the use of the space, and that in large part has driven their the concept of enclosing the vestibule in such a way that we could have additional space, especially in the wintertime during cold temperatures, for the indoor area, but then also open up the space to make it one sort of contiguous space with the outdoor area for larger events, activities, and festivals. And with that, John, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Louis. So that's kind of the grand vision. I'm going to go over some of the specifics of the architectural project here. And so I want to start by thanking the commission for having us tonight, and the planning department, especially Kelsey. You've been very helpful on this project. Also a shout out to Salt Lake City Engineering, Dot Fan, and Sean Fife are the architectural project managers over there. And also to Preservation Utah, one of our partners here. They hold a preservation easement on the building, on the mansion and the carriage house. So they've been along with us every step of the way. So David Ammett, the current acting ED there, thanks a lot for your guidance. I have a little lag here, so 1 sec, just trying to figure out, there we go. Okay, so yeah, like Lewis said, the first floor is really dedicated to an interpretive center and also a kind of a public workroom that will be used for meetings and other such events. And then the second floor, which you can see here, is going to be used more for offices for parks, especially the volunteer group. You can see how voluminous that upper loft is here. It was an acting carriage house with horses rather than, you know, a lot of the later carriage houses, they called them those, but they're basically just garages. This one actually had horses living in it. So there's a hay loft and there's a lot of space up there, which we're going to use pretty much every cubic foot of. So looking at that these are the most current floor plans. And I'll note that the materials that we've shown so far, those were done last summer as part of the budget request. So they've changed a little bit, but generally they illustrate the plan moving forward. So the main space is that exhibition / flex space, the interpretive center that Lewis was talking about. And then in the west half, there's a workroom and some public restrooms and a drinking fountain. And then this office 103, where the tack room used to be, is an ADA compliant office so that, you know, they meet accessibility requirements. And then I'll point out here, this foyer 102 is currently open air, as Kelsey was discussing. We're proposing closing it in using, on the east side, a storefront, and on the south side, a movable partition, glass partition, similar to a nano wall, if you're familiar with that company. And the reason there is really to provide some of that flexibility that Lewis was talking about. That door to the east will serve now as the main door, and it's accessible, it's ADA compliant. Whereas if people are coming in the existing exterior door near where it says stair 105, that wouldn't really be an accessible route back to those restrooms. So we think that's important. Plus they can use that additional space of that foyer. Moving up to the second floor, there's kind of a central hallway, and then off of that, there's that open office, which goes all the way up to the top of the hayloft to the cupola at the top. And then there's 2 individual offices, which are existing rooms. We're not changing any of the wall layouts on the second floor, bumping a little bit out so we can provide exhaust from those first floor restrooms, but otherwise adding a little kitchenette. And here you can see right above where it says hall / stair, you can see a ship's ladder that goes up to the old upper loft, which will be used for storage. So just running through some of the existing historical materials and what our plan is with them in no particular order. The roof is a character defining feature. We're not affecting the roof lines at all. It was re-roofed a few years ago with asphalt shingles. So we're really not touching the roof at all. The windows are all boarded up right now, but we think that all the original double hungs are in place. They're wood windows. Our plan is to, you know, just refurbish them. So sand them down, repaint them, reglaze them, and add an interior storm window for some thermal insulation. Otherwise, they're just single pane, old school wood windows, and they leak pretty badly. The doors are all there as far as we know, and they're all in repairable condition. So here in this photo, you can see it's kind of the main barn door between where the carriages were kept and where the horses were kept. It's an awesome feature, and it'll be a part of that interpretive center room, kind of the main hall. There's a steel I-beam that holds up that vestibule area, so that will just be cleaned up and repainted. There's these conical red sandstone bumpers, one of which is missing, but this shows the one on the west, which is still there. So we're either going to replace the one that's missing on the east side in kind, or do it in a similar material, or just leave it off. That's kind of still open for debate, and we can talk about that tonight. The masonry is in generally pretty good condition. There's some spot repointing that'll have to be done. It's lime-based mortar, so we'll be sure to use that. We're proposing a gentle cleaning because there's, as you can kind of see here, there's a grime on the building, and we just want to clean it up. It'll be very gentle, hand brushed and washed using water, no sandblasting or anything, obviously. There was some damage to the masonry during the earthquake on March 18th. So that's part of a separate city project, but we'll help guide them there to make sure that it meets the standards for rehabilitation in the city's rules as well. And we mentioned here the possibility of an anti-graffiti coating, which I'll talk about a little bit later, which is still kind of up in the air. And I want to note that we would not do that without doing some samples and making sure that everyone's comfortable with it on the brick. So the chimneys, there's two of them. They're character defining features. They were both damaged in the earthquake, especially the one shown here with the decorative kind of arch on the top that fell off. So that'll be reapplied. It's sitting there on the ground, so I think we can just reinstall it. And those have already been seismically upgraded. So it's, you know, if that hadn't happened, they might have just toppled over like the ones at the mansion. At least one of the mansions at one of the chimneys at the mansion completely collapsed, and the other few have obvious damage too. So stone detailing, as Kelsey said, one of the sills that's pictured here we feel is beyond repair. So we're going to try to replace it in kind with a similar stone. The other ones we think are repairable in place. They're either spalling a little bit or just flaking, which is repairable by a masonry restoration specialist. Roof soffit and modillions, those are in generally good shape. So we're gonna repaint them. We're gonna do a little bit of investigation, try to figure out what color that was all painted originally, and match that. The dormers and the cupola. So here you can see the top cupola, we're just gonna leave the venting in place and put a window behind it to get, you know, some thermal insulation there. It was just a passive ventilation for the hayloft, but we don't really want that anymore. So we're going to fill it in with a window behind the venting. Some of the exposed brick on the inside, we have to first some of it in to meet the energy codes, but otherwise we're going to try to leave most of the brick exposed where we can. The tack room was used for a while as a walk-in cooler. So we're going to demo all of that and re-expose the structure as in the other rooms. Interior stairwell, not much has to happen here. We're just going to repaint it and repair the wood as needed. We have met with the city through a DRT meeting and with the building department, and they do not believe we have to change the stairwell in any way to meet code or accessibility. Upper rooms, we'll just kind of refurbish and repaint them. And then the loft, you can kind of see it here. It's dark, but it's all exposed rafters and it's skip sheathing, and you can see through to the OSB that they put on when they re-roofed it. But to get our thermal requirements met, we're gonna put bad insulation in between the rafters and add a some sort of sheet material so that the bottom of the rafters are still exposed, but in between them there's some insulation. And that might also be a acoustic, so a perforated kind of panel, just to get better acoustics up in the office. These are some of our basis of design for new products. So this is what we're looking at for that main folding wall on the south elevation in the vestibule. Nano wall HSW60. So you can kind of see what the design intent is here. You can get it on this span, you can do it without the bottom track. So we'd be trying to top mount it. And on the left there, you can see kind of what that detail looks like. It might take some structural maneuvering up above, but the idea would be to reaffix the bead board that's kind of in that soffit now, as you can see in this detail where they have chipboard. So the only kind of effect on that soffit would be just in the width of that track. We would cut it out and put the track in and then put the soffit back in. I did just a little mock-up of how we picture that operating, the closed position on the left and the open position on the right. The walls there, so like the kind of the column and the wall that you can see on the left side of the opening are 16 inches deep. And we want to run the whole thing behind that. So we feel like the shadow line from that 16-inch recess will still convey the sense of kind of an open air, even when it's closed. And then you can see on the right, when it's open, it'll feel roughly like it does now, and that whole system will kind of pocket behind the masonry there on the west side of the opening. The storefront will be permanently in place on the east elevation there. So it'll be clear glass, 1-inch insulated glazing units. The right is kind of a little mock-up of the storefront system. It won't be that aluminum finish. It'll be a darker bronze. I just can't really find a good picture of it. It'll look, black basically. This is the graffiti system that the city generally uses on their buildings. It's been really effective in the past, including recently at the city county building, I believe, during some of these recent protests. We aren't dead set on using this, but ideally it'd be great to apply it here just because, there's not eyes on the street at all times. The office is only going to be used during the daytime, and otherwise, it's a pretty open site. The Fisher Mansion itself was tagged recently, and we just want to make sure that if it does get tagged, we can clean it up effectively. But this is something that we want to discuss with the commission tonight. I added just a few drone images we took recently of the carriage house. On this one, I wanted to point out on that west elevation, Kelsey didn't have a great picture of it, but through no fault of her own. But there's this, and I guess you can't see my pointer, but you can see above the windows there, at one point there was a shed roof addition on the west side of the carriage house. So we're going to clean all that. It's like old asphalt shingles and bituminous, some sort of bituminous goopy material. We're going to clean all that off. And all of these windows will be restored and doors. Oh, and on this one, you can kind of see that chimney. It's hard to tell, but the cap came off. There's a stone cap, I believe, on top of the brick. So here's from the southeast corner. Just wanted to point out, well, so the roof's in good condition. You can see the cupola here pretty well. And also, in contrast to what Kelsey was saying, we met with our mechanical. We are actually not going to put a louver into any of the dormer windows. Those will just be restored as windows. And here you can kind of see the chimney where that arch fell off in the earthquake. So we'll restore that to its former glory. And this is also an image you can see here, kind of around the large window in the bay. You can see some cracking in the mortar. Along the top of the header here, you can see some cracking. That was all earthquake damage. So the city's taking care of that under insurance claim as part of a separate project, but we'll help guide them and make sure that, you know, they're using materials that everyone's comfortable with. And with that, that is our presentation. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, John and Lewis. That was excellent. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Robert, I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but I guess I want to jump in early. I just want to check with the city about potential conflicts, just to be 100% sure. The firm that I work for is involved in some nature centers that are in the process of being designed in other areas along the Jordan River. I didn't, as I was reading through this material, you know, over the last few days, I didn't think that there was a conflict. The only thing that kind of made me question that was just thinking about how there was the boat ramps. And so I just want to be 100% sure that there's no conflict with me giving any kind of input on this project.
Do you stand to benefit materially or personally from this particular project?
I would say no.
Then unless you don't think you can participate in an unbiased manner, I think you're okay.
I think I'm okay as well. I just wanted to just be 100% open about it. So.
I appreciate, believe me, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention and making sure that there are no apparent conflicts or that there would be any criticism for your participation.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
John, let me ask you about the graffiti. Is this, I noticed in the materials that they talk about other advantages like mildew and moisture control and so on. Is any of that come into play, or is this just purely insulating a place that's not kind of isolated against graffiti problem?
Yeah, it's pretty much just taking the graffiti into consideration. We don't feel the brick needs to be sealed or you know, treated in any other way.
What will this do in terms of the coloration of the brick? Will I know that it was applied if I came the next day?
That's kind of the $1 million question. This particular product that we put in there that the city generally uses, I think it would create a sheen. And that said, there are, I think, other products that we could try that have been used in similar municipal historic preservation efforts on stone that got better reviews. So if I guess my idea would be we try a few of them out. We put them on an inconspicuous part of the wall. We have the commission come out and look at them, and we go from there.
Yeah, I mean, speaking for me, I'd sure like to not have it look like the brick was varnished. It just, I had a house in the Avenues. It was the 1890s, and I just would have hated to see that happen to the brick.
Yeah, and that's definitely, it's not a very shiny brick right now. It's pretty dull, and we want to maintain that.
Yeah.
And the other consideration is like the next day it might look great, but some of these over time will get UV will affect them, or the elements will affect them in other ways, and they can discolor over time. So we would really want to do our due diligence and make sure that that's not going to happen.
Do other commissioners have concern about applying the anti-graffiti?
I think I share your question or concern, Robert. Just I wonder if there are other varieties that may not leave that sort of sheen on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I sent to Kelsey last night, I sent a product that I found. There's a project in Austin, Texas that was in an underpass that was made out of limestone or sandstone. So it gets tagged all the time, and they put a product on there that was more organically based. And they said and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but that specific product both looked best when they put it on, and it made it the easiest to take the graffiti coating and also easiest to reapply. So we could look at something like that. It was not the Pro Soak product.
Well, I think it'd be great to be able to see some samples on it. That'd be a really good idea.
Okay.
Any other questions or input for John and Lewis from the commission?
So as the West Side representative, since Rocio isn't here tonight, thank you for this project. Literally ride by it like twice a week with my kids on bikes. This is an amazing spot. And I run a nonprofit on the West Side that's a music-based presenting organization. So thank you for Performance Space. Love everything about it. I'm just gonna gush. I have what is gonna be done with the main house? This is gorgeous, but that main house will be even more difficult. Are you just gonna gate it off, or?
I think Lewis can speak to that maybe better than I can.
Sure. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear your enthusiasm, and it's a great question. You know, we've been hoping and trying for years to come up with both a concept and funding for a comprehensive restoration project here that would include the mansion itself. And it always seemed like there was sort of a chicken and the egg problem where we needed enthusiasm and a workable concept before there would really be any potential of coming up with the kind of money that would be needed for restoration of the Fisher Mansion itself. You know, I think in short, we don't know, but other than that, I think we want to do our best to kind of, you know, button up the mansion, make sure it looks as presentable as possible from the outside, and then try to commit ourselves to working with the community to come up with a well-accepted vision for the activation of the Fisher Mansion, and then find funding for that. And we intend to seek a little bit of funding from the city in this next budget amendment funding cycle to fund a community visioning process, and then out of that we would hope to have at least some renderings and some rough costs that we could use to go fundraise. So I guess that, you know, at the end of the day, the answer is we don't know, but we're hoping this is a catalyst.
So there'll just be like fencing there to, I mean, I'm thinking just mostly for even beyond aesthetic, just for safety. There'll just be like some fencing to make this more like a courtyard behind it.
You know, there have been quite a few events and festivals. The space, until the earthquake, the space was open to the public to use for picnicking or whatever, although it wasn't commonly used for that. And then Fisher Brewing hosted quite a few beer garden events there, and there was some other events as well. And there was no fencing put up around the mansion for those, and we didn't have any issues. So I'm not sure that fencing is necessary. And once the masonry repairs are made to the mansion to take care of the earthquake damage to the chimneys, I anticipate that there wouldn't really be a safety issue with having people walk around the mansion as they were already doing before the earthquake.
Well, and then the final thing is, if I could just advocate as a West Side resident, can we have some really creative bike parking, please? This is like ideal for us to bike up to, and I would love it if there was a way for me to safely, West Side bike theft is a huge thing. I don't ride my bike many places because of it. If we could have something really progressive where bikes could be parked, that would be like, it would make it a destination, man.
Awesome. Noted. Thank you.
Lewis, while you're on this an ancillary surroundings here, has this been a place that people commonly go to get into the Jordan River? Or is this what you're building this fall going to be a new place?
It is not currently a place that people go to commonly access the Jordan River because right now access to the river itself is extremely difficult. However, once the boat ramp project is complete this fall, it'll be much easier, and we're hoping this is one of 4 primary access points to the Jordan River. Right now, the only formal boat ramp access in Salt Lake City is at 17th South, adjacent to what was the Seven Peaks Water Park. And when we're done with our projects this fall, we'll have 3 additional ramps. One will be located here at the Fisher Mansion. One will be located north, just on the other side of the Rocky Mountain Power Diversion, and the canoe chute at the Gadsby Trailhead. And then the final one will be located on Redwood Road at about 18th North. So kind of breaking the river up into a number of discrete floatable sections.
That's great. Thank you. Commissioners, other comments on the presentation?
I have, I guess maybe a final question regarding the repair work on the sills. If I could ask just maybe some clarification on that. With the sills, the material that it is, the proposed material to do the repairs, would that require any kind of metal like L channel framing or anything in there, or what is the approach that is being proposed for the repairs there?
Yeah, there's ways of consolidating the sandstone back involving pinning. So you put in pins and you dowel in, and then you kind of build it back up based off that. That should handle most of the sills that are damaged, I believe, other than the one that has to be replaced. We're following the GSA procedure codes on that. They have really good building maintenance for historic building guidance, even above and beyond a lot of the Park Service guidance. So I think that's included maybe in the packet, but that outlines the exfoliating and spalling stone fill treatment.
Okay, and forgive me if I'm missing something. I'm trying to find it in the report, but for the sill that does need to be replaced, what are you looking to do there?
We want to replace it in kind, which, to be honest, is probably going to require talking to a masonry specialist that we haven't done quite yet. So I think that requires some further investigation. I assume it's sandstone. I don't know what variety of sandstone it is. I don't think it's Cayenne sandstone, which is redder, I think. But I'm kind of shooting off the cuff here. But the hope would be we'd get a mason in to do some of this earthquake repairs, and we kind of pick their brain a little bit on the repairs of the rest of the building while they're there to help us design the masonry restoration.
Okay, so and I'm just trying to make sure I wrap my head around it. So the idea is basically that doweling in is going to take care of the majority of any kind of sagging or anything like that where the cracks are at.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anyone else? I've been involved in a number of these studies over the last few years, and we've often had lots to say, John, but this, from my perspective, there's just not a lot to say here. This is an excellent project. It's well conceived. It looks like you're going in the direction you need to go in, and it's like a wonderful direction. So I don't have anything else. If any other commissioners have any other input for the applicant, please speak up.
I would only say that I hope that the city does find some funds for a visioning session with the community. Once this building is done, it's just going to make the mansion look even sadder. And I'm hoping that a true good function like what you found here can be found for the mansion as well.
Yeah,
I second that. Yeah.
yep. Okay, well, if no one else said anything else, we'll say thank you to John and Lewis and the group that came, and good luck with getting this done.
Thank you very much. I think we'll see you in a few months.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. We're now going to turn to our last item, which is the Quince new construction over where Bishop's Place. We've of course dealt with this numerous times the last couple of years on the railroad sheds that were taken down and some houses. And I don't know if they've been taken down yet, but we're going to turn the time over to Lex, who's here to talk to us from the city, and the applicants are here too. So Lex, we'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hyde. You heard this project in a work session on February the 6th of this year. And at that time, I mean, it was a lengthy discussion. There were a lot of issues raised with the design that they had at that point. Some examples would be the building facing 300 West. There was a concern about the design being very repetitive, monolithic, how it related to the neighborhood, how it related to the historic district itself, the quirkiness, the charming character of the neighborhood, et cetera, and so forth. And we raised issues at that time. We outlined in a memo for you that you also discussed. Again here tonight with a new design, not a new design, but a design that they have worked on after hearing your comments from the last work session, after having worked with planning staff to try to address the issues that you raised at that prior work session. Tonight, again, I've outlined issues for you. One of the issues that I would like some guidance, some comment on, there seems to be I don't know if it's a misunderstanding or just there needs to be clarification of what historic context means. That's one of the standards for new construction. And I think that there is, it's muddled. What the applicant thinks is a historic context, what you would consider to be the historic context, things of that nature. If you could talk a little bit about that, in addition to the massing, the scale, the historic appropriateness, the building materials, the articulation, the design, et cetera, and so forth. In addition to the design modifications that have been done since the February work session, the applicant at this point is also requesting one more special exception for some additional building height on several of the units on the interior of the block. And I'll let them talk about that. The applicant, I just want to note this, that the applicant emailed me some questions that I forwarded onto you, as well as they were put into your Dropbox that they wanted to address tonight. Questions concerning the color scheme, the materials, the activation of the courtyard, the streetscape, the rear yard setback, and in terms of whether it's appropriate and maybe pushing that back further so you could have more of a front yard. They kind of want to get to a better understanding of whether or not they're closer to a design and a product that is something that you could support. Tonight, we have the applicant here, Paul Garbett, who represents Garbett Homes, as well as their architect, Tyler Kirk. And with that, unless you have questions of me, I'm going to turn the time over to the applicant to talk about their design at this point.
Lex, I would be interested in what, and maybe a little more clarity from you before they speak about what you meant by historical context in terms of what your feelings or opinion. You're the staff person that's looked at this and more familiar with how that's defined, what that means in your mind as a member of the staff.
Well, when we first met with these folks, when they came in, I guess the perspective that I had on it was the fact that all of the structures along Bishop Place there had been approved for demolition. And therefore, the historic context of that particular street would be gone. And I think that there was some discussion in the last work session that, in my mind, alluded to the fact that even though those buildings may be gone, that is still the historic context. And that's a valid perspective too. You know, typically I think when we think about historic context, we think about the streetscape, we think about the immediate vicinity, and we think about the historic district as a whole. And so we're dealing with a little bit different animal here. We're not dealing with one house that's gone out of a particular streetscape. We're talking about all the houses along a particular street. And I guess I was thinking about that being more that particular historic context would essentially be eliminated. And I think that there was maybe some misunderstanding with some talk from that previous work session that maybe we could discuss a little bit further so that everybody is clear about what the historic context really means and whether or not, even though those homes are gone, does that still constitute the historic context?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Garbett, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for allowing me to present. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. I'll go forward with my presentation here. Let's see. Okay, so over the time from the work session that we had in February till now, we've gone through a number of revisions, and I've worked pretty diligently to incorporate the comments and the feedback that we received from you as the commissioners back in February. And while doing that, I think for us, what we're trying to particularly pay attention to is the historic context of this streetscape. The configuration of Bishop Place, and so as a side note, we have decided to no longer call it the Quince. We are going to name this community Bishop Place so that name continues on. It was something that we heard from residents, and we feel there's value in keeping that name. But what we're looking at here is the configuration of this project is a little bit different than maybe your standard one, where the bulk of this is located within the interior of this block. So in our view, it doesn't necessarily form part of the streetscape that you would find along 300 West. And what we've done along 300 West is to try and incorporate all those suggestions and comments that we got from you so that the streetscape that will be viewable from the pedestrian and the drive-by will seamlessly connect and interact with the streetscape that is currently there. And if you look at building one, it largely follows the footprint of the current existing structure that sits there right now, the height, the scale, the orientation. And to us, that helps. Obviously, any new development is going to be a disruptor, but as far as the streetscape, by making that as seamless as possible, we're containing kind of the changes into the interior that will have less of an impact on the pedestrian interaction, the vehicular interaction, and we believe will blend much better with the surrounding streetscape block and the historic district. On this, so what we've done, we've broken up 2 different buildings where before it was a solid block of them. We have 2 duplexes here in the front, some visitor parking. These are unique floor plans. And then inside, we're trying to create a courtyard feel that fosters and encourages community, encourages interaction, encourages activation of the space. So in order to do that, what we've done is, you know, in building 3, kind of those 2 middle units that are a little bit slimmer, those would be 3 stories, excuse me. And the longer ones are 2 stories. And that brings, you know, an added level of variation, of variety, gives a lot more architectural nuance to the streetscape. And one thing we tried to do is to turn this long street of Bishop Place, that is, you know, one of the few remaining courtyards within the historic district, but to make that not just a vehicular access, but a walk street, something that can be used, have a number of different uses, right? So vehicles, obviously, bikes, cars, but by accentuating it and varying it with concrete and accents to make it feel more kind of like a, like a placeo, or kind of a, you know, give that sort of, you know, European type feel where cars can go on there, but you also feel comfortable walking on it. That was kind of our solution, an idea that we had to activate the courtyard so that it becomes an amenity and is not simply a driveway. We have benches in front of each of these buildings in the rear part of the courtyard, lights, and just trying to activate this space so that we can foster a greater sense of community within the development. So here's the latest version that we have of the unit facing 300 West. You know, some of the comments that we got from the last work session was pay close attention to the frontage along 300 West. There needs to be more street relevance, multiplicity of colors, more connection to the ground and the neighborhood. On later slides, I have some comparisons of what it used to look like and what we've come to now, but we feel that this, you know, elongated porch, both on the lower level and above, create greater symmetry. The orientation we feel is much stronger towards 300 West, oriented more towards the pedestrian, and a much more welcoming feel to it. The multiplicity of colors and materials is evident here right at the beginning of our project, and further enhanced as you move further back. Here's a view of the streetscape. As you can see, we're trying to maintain a similar sense and scale to what was previously there, even echoing some of the materials, some of the forms, but in more of a modern, in a modern way. Here are a number of views of just as you move into the interior of the project, you can start to see the introduction of colors, different materials, and you know, from the last work session, we heard that we need more individuality. We need to preserve kind of that sense of quirkiness that you can find in the Marmalade district and in this district as well. And here we're introducing more vibrant, colorful colors along with greater variety in architecture. You know, front doors and garages come straight onto this walk street. The addition of these benches, we're really just trying to activate this space so that it has a greater sense of community, of neighborhood. You know, space to breathe, foster a sense of community. Again, by increasing the height, we're able to set back those buildings and open up the space, give some breathing room, make it a place that people will want to gather. And I think that we've definitely made improvements from our last version. Variation in forms and heights and facades, places to relax and interact. Each of these units have these outdoor balconies, but also in the front you have amenities that encourage greater interaction and greater activation of the street. More connected to the ground, preserve charm and quirkiness. And, you know, again, that's what we're trying to do is just add more variety. We, you know, I think our last version definitely was very monotonous, and I feel we've come quite a long ways in just breaking that up and creating a space that is attractive to residents and where they would, you know, not only view it as a driveway, but as an amenity. You know, I think this proximity helps to encourage gathering. It encourages interaction. It kind of brings down the scale of the development so that it's more approachable. Kind of an aerial courtyard view that we have, showing, yeah, once again, different roof lines, different shapes and forms that we're using in here. This is kind of a backed out view. The colors are not accurate. This is more just to visualize kind of the, you know, where the scale is and how it fits into the greater district, the greater block. One thing to note is that we deliberately wanted to keep that extra height contained to the interior of the courtyard so as to not introduce it right up in your face, right along 300 West. So where you see that is here behind the existing office building. That's the first place where we introduced the additional height. That is about 150 feet into the interior from the street. I think the thought with that is that it gives enough space to transition so that it's not overwhelming and jarring to the pedestrian or to the you know, the driver, the viewer. Here are the different materials that we're using, kind of taking cues from what exists in the neighborhood, in this district: brick, wood siding, you know, a historically influenced mixture of materials. The different color scheme, trying to keep it very as varied as we possibly can, keep it interesting, make it different, make it something unique that can add to the neighborhood. Once again, the setbacks that we're asking for is 10 feet from the rear yard. The standard is 15 feet. With this 10 feet, we're able to have more space in between buildings 4 and 3. We feel that it's more valuable to have space within the interior there rather than on that rear yard that abuts parking for the neighboring apartment building. Here I've outlined the specific buildings that we're asking for a height exception. The standard height is 28 feet. We're asking for 36 feet. And then we continue to ask for the lot width exception. What the zoning requires is a 22-foot lot width. And we're asking for a couple of feet, so 19 feet as our lot width. Just another point to make is that the zoning would allow for 27 units. We have, from our previous version that was 25, we're now at 24. So we are trying to be mindful of the density. We're trying to do not just maximize the density, but make something that makes sense for the neighborhood, makes sense for this location. And then just some comparisons of where we were and where we're at today. You can see on our previous submittal, kind of the whole orientation of the front door was off to the side. I think our current iteration is much more balanced, symmetrical. Clearly is, you know, pedestrian oriented towards 300 West. I think it has a much greater symmetry with what's currently there. Previous submittal was rows of, you know, pretty monotonous rows of townhomes, and now we're introducing much more scale or different types of scale, massing, design, a lot more features or windows. And then here's the previous site plan and the current submittal. And I believe, yeah, so that's kind of what I've prepared, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts and comments and get your feedback on it.
Thank you, Paul. Commissioners, I wasn't there at the February meeting. How many of the other 4 of you that are here tonight were at the February meeting?
I was.
Jessica was. Were you, Paul?
I was.
Right.
And I was there as well.
Was I?
Victoria, were you there?
Yes.
Okay, so you're all familiar with it. So questions and comments for the applicant?
I would like to jump in. I am very interested in Victoria's input because I know that you had a lot to.
You may remember my passion surrounding this project. True.
Yes. But to start off, the one thing I do have to say that I appreciate the changes as far as like trying to individualize the units. I think that was probably a big point of contention that we had. The one thing that really stands out to me though with the new design, when thinking of a historical concept, is the Scandinavian style of the gable roof ends. It seems almost to me that is leaning a little too modern, or a little too outside of trying to stay within the historical context. And like just one modification that seems to come to mind just right off the bat is that maybe instead of having that that Scandinavian the walls, the side walls, instead of that maybe a column, and that might give it more of that traditional sort of historical look. I guess that's probably the one thing that jumped out first, but I'm really interested to hear what Victoria has to say.
As someone who was probably the fiercest critic of this when it was presented last time, I think every modification on here is exceptional. I think it actually captures what Marmalade is, which is a little bit funky, but definitely an upwardly mobile neighborhood. There was at least one fedora in the rendering, which is super Marmalade, but that guy his pants are way too wide leg. We're still in skinny jeans, so we should fix that. But outside of that, like, I love it. It almost has like a Park City feel to me. It feels like something from Kimball Junction or something brought down, and it has that kind of like, I have leisure time and I'm spending it with the people who live near me, and I really love it. I would defer to the architects on the things that Jessica was just speaking, but from a strictly aesthetic thing, my heart will always break that we were not able to save Bishop Place and the historicity that is there. But I think this honors the ethos that was that Bishop Place development, which is, a functional living space that also promotes a social living experience. And I would be inclined to be okay with the setbacks and with the height exemptions, because I think, number one, the space is functionally used, and the height doesn't bother me because all of Marmalade is upward right now. It is surrounded by the library developments are all super tall. So the height doesn't bother me. So I feel for a project like this, there should be some latitude on those sorts of considerations. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks for the comments.
Yeah, I can comment as well. I was there in February, and the notion of the questions that were asked about massing scale, appropriateness, materials, building articulation, and compatibility with adjacent. I think this is a very good step, a big step forward. Just in terms of the massing, looking at the rendering down below, they don't all look the same. They're not all the same color. There's in and out, up and down. I like that, and the scale is appropriate. Some are shorter, some are taller, and Victoria, like you, I don't mind the height variation because it's in the middle. I specifically drove around this site and this big block, and this is a product of Salt Lake, big blocks. What do you do in the middle of the block? And what's been done on the middle of this block? And think about it. There's commercial to the west, a little bit to the south. There's residential and apartments to the south and to the east. You've got the church parking to the north. So this is a little enclave in the middle of the block, and I laud that you're trying and attempting, with the making the street something more than just an alley to get to your garage, and that's well done. The notion of having the lights, of having kids out there and play, and that this is, quote, your neighborhood. People that live here, I think, are going to drive slowly because there's kids out there and they're going to their houses. I will just say, Paul, well done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I would also like to add that I do appreciate the decision to keep the name Bishop Place. I think that is an important step in keeping the historical aspect of the area.
Yeah, it was, when we first went to the neighborhood, I was actually pretty surprised that was one of the biggest issues that they wanted us to keep the name. So we're happy to do it.
If I may just go back to my comment and just maybe ask the other design-minded folks on the commission about the opinion of the sort of Scandinavian feel of the gables. I don't know if I'm alone in that opinion or if anybody else has thoughts on that.
Yeah, sorry, real quick. Jessica, would you mind which image would best illustrate what you're talking about?
Well, I think the one you were just on, I think any of these. So I think, just for any of you folks, basically where the roof plane overhang is in line with the sidewalls, where there's, the pop out from the sidewall, basically. That seems a little Scandinavian feel, but with the materials you're using, it does, veer a little away from that. But just typical Scandinavian architecture, that's kind of what you see there, is where the sidewalls are in plane with the roof overhang.
Yeah, so for example, on this image, kind of the light wood section, is that what you're talking about?
So the light tan brownish gable wall, and then you have the white sidewalls that are leading up to the white roof overhang. That seems a little Scandinavian to me, but that just might be my interpretation. So just wondering what the other folks think. I don't think we can hear you, Mike. I think you're muted.
Sorry. I would tend to agree, and I think that there's a little, one of the things that we talked about is neighborhood quirkiness, and all of the, not all of them, but most of the houses have porches, that they have different columns, brackets, different kinds of lights, and I would think that if there was some playfulness in how the gable was terminated, maybe some of them would have brackets. Some of them would just have overhangs. Some of them could stay, with the kind of the Scandinavian look, but that there was a little bit of playfulness in that as well. I think that would add to the individual nature of what you're showing along the street, and just break it up so that it's not, A, B, A, B, A, B, in which you've done a great job with. Don't get me wrong, but I think just one more step, and I think then it would be a home run.
Yeah, okay. And if I may add to that, and another thing that popped up is that maybe a combination of a little bit of varying roof overhangs with columns with different column types or, brackets, like Mike was saying, between the individual units, that might also correlate with the color schemes just to kind of give it that cohesiveness. Something kind of playful like that. Yeah, just but I think that sidewall Scandinavian look is just really sticking out for me.
Okay, yeah, I think that's definitely something that we can play around with. I think we mentioned it in our last work session, but kind of the idea is a lot of the existing structures have kind of that gabled look to them. We're trying to echo that in this design. I think you bring up some good points. I think, yeah, there's definitely some things that we could play around with on that.
Can I jump in here and bring up a point that we've raised in our memo about the windows and particularly the windows in those gables? They're showing like side by side, single double hung windows, and the solid to void ratio in that bothers me a little bit. Any comment on that? We've suggested the use of like a mullion between the windows to separate them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm actually looking at some of the existing properties, and it looks like there's kind of a variation of mullions and kind of some picture windows with some side windows. That might be something that we should consider, as well as in sort of that, like Mike was saying, that AB, and just where we have these kind of differentiated units, that we stick with community, the community style of windows where there are some variations, but maybe consider that in those kind of individual units.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could definitely look at.
Any other comments or input from commissioners?
I think I have a completely different take on this project than everybody else, and it's totally not the first time that has happened. But I really took Lex's question to heart about the how the ordinance should be interpreted in this case with respect to some of the criteria that refer to historic context. And I went back and read the whole section of the ordinance that deals with new construction. And I ended up being more convinced than ever that the ordinance envisions a streetscape that is similar to the historic structures that are there now. Like where the ordinance says, with respect to the character of the street block, that the design of the buildings reflect the historic character of the street. I think this project could not be any further from that. And I think the only way you can really get to supporting this project is if you don't think too much about the guidelines, and you sort of interpret the guidelines in a way that renders them almost totally inapplicable in this case. So I'm a no on this, but I think I might be the only one, and that's fine.
Paul, let me push back on you a little bit on that, or just a question, because I've often, since I've been on the commission, I've been a little intrigued on how we've often approved really modern buildings houses going in the place of other ones, and I've often wondered. It didn't feel historic to me at all, but I guess I'm not an architect for sure by background, and it seems like it's been pretty standard practice to have it look historical. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to look modern, I guess.
Well, I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm one of the strongest advocates for modern architecture that gels well with the historic surroundings. It's not the modernism of the buildings that bothers me at all. It's the whole idea that we're taking a historic street that had something like 11, or I think 11 structures on it, most of which were single family, and we're replacing it with just a huge row of townhouses. I personally don't think that's what the ordinance envisions. Disagree. You know, there are different ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
Paul, correct me if I'm wrong though, the street that we're talking about, the one that actually cuts through Bishop Place, is a private street. That's not a city maintained street, correct? So wouldn't the ordinance be, if that's true, if I'm correct in that, then wouldn't the ordinance be referring to the streetscape from 300 West? Is that the street there? Isn't
consider Bishop Street? I mean, I don't care who owns it. The ordinance doesn't differentiate.
Okay.
So, Paul, I'd actually like to ask, because you brought up a good point that is kind of one of my hesitations. I thought a lot about the streetscape and also how that reflects onto the street. But another big part of that we talked a lot about when this came up last time was about the density, and we, discussed why that was necessary. But thinking at least about the Third West streetscape, I'm actually looking at the photo of the structure that's there right now, and thinking again about my comments about that, again, those sidewalls, that kind of Scandinavian look, where I think that as far as the streetscape, they were able to, kind of give a nod to what was there, other than those sidewalls of the Scandinavian look. I'm curious, is your opinion a matter of the density and the lack of greenscape, or is it more kind of about that architectural fill that's just not being achieved?
Well, it's my whole issue it comes straight from the standards in the ordinance. I mean, let me read this again. Character of the street block. The design of the buildings reflect the historic character of the street. Now, if you're going to consider the street Third West, okay, but I don't. I consider it Bishop Place. And this proposal doesn't doesn't have anything to do with the historic character of Bishop Place. It's just that simple. I think
what would help it would just reducing the density down to something more comparable to what's there, would that satisfy the requirements for you, or is it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if they came with a little scattering of duplexes and small single family houses that looked exactly like this, I'd sign up in a heartbeat. But I don't think that's what I think that's what the ordinance requires.
I have to say that, again, just thinking back to the February meeting, I think that was a big part of what we all discussed, and that we were sort of all rooting for a little bit more community space. And to that point, I think that there are some improvements to this design for community space and yard space and the front living space. The last design, there was pretty much, I remember somebody made a comment about how you just pull into the garage, you go in your home, and you never see your neighbors. There's a little more fill, but I do have to say that actually that is one thing that kind of sticks out to me, to this design, especially on the slide that we're looking at right now. There are benches, but there's no front yard space. There's no, there's not a lot of community space. I don't know if we're able to discuss density or, community space in that sense. Sometimes green space has been shot down in other previous meetings, but I do have to say that that is one point that really stuck out to me, and I hesitated to bring it up until you guys are talking about it.
I would support that, Jessica, because one of the things that sticks out from the visit there when we had free reign to run around was like, you feel like you're hidden under a canopy of trees. And so respecting kind of the green space, making use of whatever is there, preserving any trees that can be preserved, all of those things to me would enhance. I defer to you all on things, like I said, about like density and things like that. But I do think, the green space would factor heavily into honoring the historical nature of it.
Yeah, and just thinking, as a parent with a young child, just thinking about the way that they play around, even just 6 feet between units, and that might eliminate a couple units, even 6 feet of grass space between each unit instead of being connected. That's still usable green space, for families, and especially if you're considering these, trying to look at the height requirements and looking at, the number of bedrooms that you're implementing here. You're thinking of putting families in this space. That's a lot of kids. Again, I don't know if this is in our purview, but again, I'm just thinking as a member of the community, what that means for the usability.
So if I may, one of the, this angle does show, we are trying to create as much green spaces in the front as we possibly can. We have about 10 feet in the backyards on all the units. Some have more. And we went through the exercise of, is it more valuable to have that green space in the backyard versus the front yard? And what I can speak to is my experience as a homeowner at the Garbett project that they did on West Temple, Almonds, and Almond Street. And those backyards are heavily utilized by all of the residents. If you walk back there, you'll see everyone has a barbecue there. Everyone has, 5 or 6 chairs that are permanently set up there. On a weekend night, it's not uncommon to see half of the residents hanging out in their backyards and gathering together across the boundaries in their backyard. So to me, based on my experience, I think it's very valuable to maintain that green space in the back. It also creates kind of a sense of, maybe that's your private backyard, but it's easy to kind of cross over and meet with your neighbors. In the front, we definitely have, constraints that we're dealing with, but with the lack of green space, we're trying to make up for that with, this walk street that we hope to become a place where kids can ride their bike. They can hang out, the parents can gather, and that's what we're seeing at our project on Almond Street is, and I don't know if it's just, COVID has made everyone more social and you're trying to get outside and have interaction with anyone. But on any summer evening, if you drive by, you'll see half of the residents gathered outside in the street, on the sidewalks, in the front, talking, riding bikes. And I envision that this will be even more of a conduit for that, because it is enclosed. It's a courtyard, and residents, when it's their home, it's their driveway, they're fiercely protective of making sure that everyone respects that and drives slowly. And I really do believe that it will become a valuable amenity. To kind of circle back to some of Paul's comments, I think the way that we're looking at this is that, the historical context based on the approval for demolition shifts to more of the streetscape along 300 West. The typical projects that, that we look at in the city, I think are along those major blocks. This one is unique because it goes into a courtyard. And so I think the burden of being true to to the streetscape and true historical context weighs more heavily towards the 300 West point of view. And, you know, we've really tried to make that as seamless, as you know, sensitive to the block as possible. So yeah, I mean, I guess those are, you know, kind of the comments that I have based on the discussion up to this point. And going back to the site plan, you know, you have those front porches above and in between the buildings. I think, you know, an improvement I'm seeing right now that we could easily make is maybe some community garden space, room to plant large shade-giving trees in the backs and even in some areas in the front. So, you know, it's something that we're definitely aware of and trying to be sensitive to.
Yeah, I think that's good input to listen to, Paul. One of Paul's questions in his memo was whether we would like to see whether we have an opinion about moving the houses back, putting more of the space in the back and the front, making bigger courtyard but less backyard. Does anyone have an opinion about that?
If there's, looking at the scale of the site plan, we're looking at, and I think that Paul might have mentioned that, Paul Garbett might have mentioned that, you know, 10 feet of backyard space. Is there an you know, a sufficient amount of setback into that backyard space to create front yard space that creates a real usable sense of front yard? This is definitely an improvement over the last design, but just looking at renderings, it just seems so, you know, even looking at the way that the rendering depicts people using the space, it seems there's a lot of concrete space and not much green out front.
Yeah, so I think that's a fair, you know, that's a fair assessment of the site. Once again, I can speak to my experience that backyard space really is a valuable amenity for residents. And, you know, everything on this site is a series of trade-offs. And if we did move the buildings back, I think what you create are, I don't know if you add that much green space, but you do create longer sidewalks, longer driveways. In my personal opinion, I really do believe that the backyard space, that is the green space for the residents, and it becomes a valuable amenity that can be as private or as shared as they want it to be. And the experience I have is that it's, you know, it's a valuable amenity for residents to choose to use as they want in the moment. So in my opinion, I would keep it as it is. But yeah, I mean, glad to hear any thoughts you guys have.
So just to add to that, and just kind of again looking at the site map that we're all looking at right now, you know, we have these pockets of green space that we would, I guess, consider community space. You know, what sort of delineation would be used to separate? Is there a plan for, again, you kind of mentioned planting trees or the fences or anything like that, so that where there are these excess pockets of green space, to make it clear to the rest of the community that this is a community space?
Yeah, typically what we do is kind of at the you know, in between each unit, we'll do kind of a small divider fence that's, you know, 3 or 4 feet long. So it gives a little bit of privacy, but you're able to walk completely along the length of the backyard, right? So it gives a little bit of a screen, but it's it does leave it open to walking around the building and having access to that backyard space. I mean, in our HOA developments, basically everything outside of your front door and your back door is shared community space. And I think that's something that we could, maybe in our next meeting is do a better job of showing exactly what we're planning here. I think, community gardens would be great. If you drive through our development now, you'll see gardens that people planted on their front porches in planter boxes. I think having an area kind of there behind building 5 and to the side of building 2, easily we could set up some planter boxes, and then also activating the space between buildings 3 and 4 to make better use of that green space that's behind the guest parking.
And this might be a question for Lex, but you Paul, you sort of mentioned HOA, but there is not an intention of this becoming HOA to where folks are limited to individualizing these units, because I think that's also a part of keeping the spirit of what Bishop Place originally was.
Yeah, the intent behind the HOA is to, shared maintenance of the yards, to maintain the exterior of the buildings, to cover those shared costs that people incur in a development like this.
So really is kind of not one of the standards for new construction. I appreciate a lot of these comments, but I would encourage you to focus on the 7 standards for new construction, because those are the standards by which you got to base your decision.
Thanks, Lex.
Can I bring up one more point? There was a lot of discussion at the last work session about the unit that faces directly onto 300 West. They've made some significant changes to that unit. Any feedback on that?
I would just go back to my very original comment about the kind of Scandinavian style that, looking at the original, the existing house that's there, it's a little more sort of craftsman, I guess, with the columns. That's my only feedback on that.
Jessica, so are you saying you would maybe recommend kind of toning down the Scandinavian influence on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, sort of what Mike was discussing a little bit earlier, maybe different uses of, brackets maybe, or different, like maybe using a column instead of that sidewall, something along those lines. That to me, I think, at least me personally, that has really jumped out to me since the first time I looked at that, at the schematic designs, that it just really jumps out to me as that aspect of it is very different than any of the surroundings. Anything, not necessarily like we're trying to match historical, but just that it just really stands out to me in this context.
Yeah.
There you go. I want to make a comment about, I've got the Google Earth of the existing open in front of me right now, and I'm trying to pick the 10 or so really large trees that are there on site now, and see where they would lay in with the site plan, Paul, that you had presented, and I'm wondering, you've made the notion and you've made the direction of trying to create a community here that somewhat replicates what was there, the feeling that was there. And I'm wondering if there might not be a halfway measure of starting with where the really large, dozen trees are, and having that be the focus of the community. To Paul's comment earlier of, that this doesn't replicate in any way, shape, or form what is there. I understand what he's saying, but at the same time, to replicate what is there is 12 smaller units that I'm not certain that's the direction either. So the notion of taking the amenities of the site, the really large trees, very large trees, and making that and incorporating those into the layout of what you've done with and I appreciate the fact that you've gone from 27 to 24 units, that maybe the positioning of the units that you have can work with the big trees that are there, and those are the natural community spaces that are already there, that can work with your design.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could look at to see how we can preserve and incorporate the existing trees within our design.
Thank you, Mike. Is there any other commissioners have any other input they'd like to give the applicant? If not, we'll thank you, Paul, and let you come back, get approval for everything here in a while.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks everyone for your time.
Yeah, thank you for your help, and thank you, Lex, for all your efforts on this.
Thank you, Bob.
Anybody else have anything we need to discuss here on the commission tonight? That ends our agenda. Unless you just want to stay on and see if we can make it a longer meeting.
Good job chairing, Bob. Not easy. Well done.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
Good job all.
Let's
Have a good night.
we'll see everyone on Thursday, September 3rd then.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.